So it's 2026, which is kind of like holy moly, like what the hell? And handheld debate still exists. Of course it does. So I kind of have been thinking about the topic for a while, and I've done 3DS videos in the past, but I never really talked about the handheld like ecosystem as a whole. So I figured I'd kind of just kick off this year and my channel by doing a video specifically on that topic. So in this video, I'm actually going to be talking about the 3DS scene as a whole and like 3DS adjacent handhelds. I'm going to be specifically talking about the 3DS. I'm going to be talking about PC handhelds and specifically the Steam Deck. And I'm also going to be talking about the Ayn Thor. My main point of bringing all these up isn't to say that there's a clear winner and to say, like, you should buy this handheld, you should buy this handheld, you should buy that handheld. It's to say that there's a lot of little nuances and reasons why one may or may not be the winner. And my goal is to kind of just provide you with a bit of guidance on where to look based off of individual needs. So if that sounds appealing to you, then feel free to stick around because I definitely will have some thoughts on every handheld. So I just want to also make it clear, I actually only own a 3DS. I don't own a Steam Deck or a Ayn Thor, so I'm kind of going to be speaking off of just personal like evaluations and just what I've seen other people say. Also, just considering my own thoughts on other adjacent handhelds, like the fact that I own a 3DS, I know the form factor. Between the fact that I own a Switch, I know what the more powerful stuff feels like. So that's a lot where my interpretations come from. So as I said, I'm just here to talk about consoles, not say which one's best. So, I guess we'll get started now. There's not really much of a reason to keep going with this. So I think the first place to start is just going to be the actual 3DS itself. I think the main reason you'd be going for a 3DS, honestly, is just for having the original hardware itself. There's definitely not a lot of reasons to justify going for the 3DS as your hardware. I know some people love having physical games, and, maybe some people don't want to mod their 3DS. I know that's kind of the main driver to buy one currently in 2026, but, there's definitely a scene around people who don't want to mod it and just want something easy to use, and there's completely a justifiable reason to go for it for that. However, you do definitely get, like, some sense of, like, tinkering and modding, messing around with stuff if you do mod your 3DS. You do get a very, very big game library with what the 3DS had. I'll get more on, like, drawbacks later, but what else? You get all the Nintendo software and stuff. Like, I'm just thinking, I think the big one is Pokemon Bank. That's a very, very convenient thing for me to own just because I have Home on my Switch too. And honestly, if it weren't for Bank, I probably would have picked another console to get. It's just the fact that that little integration is just perfect for what I need. So that's definitely the pluses for the 3DS for me, at least. I would argue for downsides, you definitely have a couple. I think the biggest one is just the hardware is very much just outdated. It's an old handheld. There's no denying that. It's outdated, It plays the games it does play just fine, but you're not getting any newer games on it. And for some people, that might be a drawback. Some people want that, and that's actually a plus side, but it's just going to depend on what you're after. I think the other thing, too, is with modding, you can only go so far with it. After all, it's still whatever Nintendo says goes, It's not like some of the other handhelds, like the Steam Deck and stuff, where you do get more of that open thing, which I'll get more into that once we get to those handhelds themselves. But that's definitely another drawback to consider. I think another pretty big thing, too, is just the games themselves. They are kind of dated. Like, yes, they are still good games. It's just some people would like to have access to their new games as well. And you basically are only getting up to whatever the 3DS had, which was, I think, probably, I believe 6 years ago. For some reason, I'm thinking, like, games stopped in, like, 2020 or so. I could be wrong. I'm, like, if I'm wrong, I'll put a note here. Otherwise, it's been basically 6 years now of just not having any gaming updates, so that's a really long time. And then lastly, just kind of goes hand in hand with just like the ecosystem itself getting really outdated, like Nintendo moving on from the 3DS era onto specifically just the Switch. That's a pretty big drawback too, so I think the 3DS is a great option if you want, as I said, I say two things where I say the 3DS is going to win. I'd say situation one is you want just the original hardware and you don't care about having like a versatile device and you just want the 3DS experience, or you're someone like me who wanted something like, say, Pokemon Bank, and you want all those kinds of like seamless integration features, especially when you kind of upgrade your stuff to the Switch. So that's kind of where I say the 3DS wins. Otherwise, I say there are definitely two other competitors for like what the best one to go for is if you're looking for something 3DS like in 2026. So I think the next place to go is, I'm going to say the Steam Deck and just the PC handheld like scene in general. You definitely are getting a big upgrade over not the Switch 2, the 3DS. The biggest one I'd say is the game library. You're getting such a bigger game library. You're getting between emulation, between Steam's library, between any third-party games, between everything. It's such a bigger library, and I can see that being a huge plus for anyone who does like having a big video game collection and likes having it on the go with them. That's a huge plus. There's some other benefits too. I say you did like between like you could dock it, kind of use it as like a PC to a monitor. You know, you kind of get like the Switch experience if that's what you're after. You get much more modernized hardware, as I said. Even like newer ones, like I believe the Xbox handheld just came out a couple months ago. That's probably, you know, I'm not too sure the specifics on how powerful of a PC handheld that is. I think it's pretty strong, but maybe it's not. Let me know in the comments if I'm off. I just don't want to missell it. I just want to offer this as like a where should you go kind of thing. So let me know if I'm getting anything off, please. But there definitely is, you know, another big thing I know a lot of people love is the open ecosystem. Some people don't like having their ecosystems limited in the way that, say, like Nintendo does. This lets you not do that. And, you know, like I'm thinking with SteamOS and all the stuff you could do with it and all the, you know, basically the fact that you're encouraged to mess around with the hardware, that's something that Nintendo doesn't do. And that's something I know a lot of people love to do, so that's very much a plus. That being said, you think there are some drawbacks to PC handhelds. I think the biggest one, as I've noticed, is just the battery life on these things. Like, even with my Switch 2, I noticed that just the battery life is very, 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 like, not great. Like, you're always thinking about if you have a charger at the ready because you're kind of gonna need one eventually. Like the 3DS, I kind of forget to charge mine and still just kind of ready to go. My Switch 2, it doesn't last a couple hours before I'm needing to find a charger for it. That's potentially a drawback for some people. The other one, I think, is just the fact that some people don't want to tinker with hardware. I know some people who just prefer when technology works, and that's a completely understandable place to be with tech. And I think if that's you, and if you don't like messing around with settings, then maybe like the Steam Deck or just any kind of PC handheld where you kind of have to do that may not be your thing, and that's completely understandable. I think another thing too is the size of them. The PC handhelds are really big, and I know some people love that. I personally you know, I'm a fan of my Switch 2. As I say, that's kind of my comparison for these, just because it is a somewhat similar size. But I'm a huge fan of just having all my games just on the ready, on the go, regardless of where I am. That's definitely a reason why I kind of shifted away from like PC gaming and went more so just for my Switch to be like my kind of just one-stop place for like every single one of my games. But I know some people don't like the size. I know some people prefer small handhelds, but then also just prefer like a big screen like place to game. So if that's you, then that might be a drawback. So I think the other ones, I think that's really it though for like the Steam Deck. And I think the main verdict on the Steam Deck is I think it's a fantastic piece of hardware if you want something powerful, or just like I should say any PC handheld in general. I say go for that if you want something powerful. And if you want just versatility, if, you know, say Nintendo stuff like getting Pokemon Bank, if getting that is useless to you, then I don't really see much of a reason to justify the 3DS, to be completely honest with you. And I think that leaves me open to my third, like, kind of nominee for this discussion, and that is the Ayn Thor, so I will go there next. I think lastly, the final handheld to bring to this discussion, just because it's such a prevalent one, is the Ayn Thor. I think this is a pretty new handheld. Like, it just came out a couple months ago, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks really cool on paper. I think it's awesome, honestly. There's definitely a lot that you're getting over the 3DS with it, kind of to the point that it kind of becomes like, why buy a 3DS? Like, the main benefits I see are just one, the hardware like bumps over it. You know, I believe it has an OLED screen. I believe it has, you know, it basically is a 3DS in the form factor that it has. It's just more modernized. I think that's a really cool concept. And just like the more mature like thumbsticks and stuff, it's a very, very cool piece of hardware, I'm gonna be honest with you. But you do definitely get, to me at least, it feels more like a very, very healthy middle ground of the 3DS, but also of the Steam Deck. I still think the Steam Deck is most likely going to be just the more powerful option, but the Ayn Thor is really, really cool, and like just the fact that it has such a big game library because of like what it does combined with the 3DS's form factor. And I think even on my 3DS video I did all the way back in October, I got a couple people who just said like, no, get an Ayn Thor, like, and that's pretty funny to me. Like, it really is like that handheld, but I think it's a really cool like piece of hardware. I think your main drawbacks with it, as I said, if you want Nintendo's like stuff, like I say with Pokemon Bank, that was kind of like what was the deal breaker for me and why I just wanted the 3DS instead. So if that sounds like you, unfortunately, I don't know if the Ayn Thor is going to cut it. What else though? There definitely is some other stuff. like hardware stuff. As I said, hardware, you'd most likely want to go for the Steam Deck if you just need something powerful, but also want emulation as like a side thing. If you just want something little, if you want the 3DS experience, but you don't want the outdated hardware, the Ayn Thor is such an excellent option, and like, at least from what I've seen about it, I don't think I could recommend it enough to anyone who wanted something of that, just because I completely get like what it goes after. So I think that's really my thoughts overall. So I guess we'll just kind of move on and just give like a final like word before I close out this video for good. So I think the main point I really want to say before even getting into most of this is that my main point with even making this video is just to prove that like none of these consoles really replace each other. Like, the main point is just finding the one you buy and just feeling happy with what you bought, and that's kind of why I wanted to make this video, was just because like I wanted to just bring like a bit of nuance to this console discussion. So for me at least, I would say it mostly just depends on what kind of answer you're trying, or what kind of question you're trying to answer with the handheld, right? Like, if your question is like, how do I play, original hardware, you're going to want the 3DS, If your question is like, like, how do I get the most powerful hardware, you're going to want the Steam Deck. And, if you're like, what if I want somewhere in the middle, you'd probably you'd be best off with the Ayn Thor. So I think it really kind of just boils down to what you're trying to achieve with these handhelds, because, as I said, like, it's just so hard for them to cancel each other out. Like, the Ayn Thor could be a complete replacement for the 3DS if it supported Pokemon Bank, but it doesn't, so then the 3DS still has a reason to exist, The Steam Deck, theoretically, is just a complete power bump over the Ayn Thor, but the Ayn Thor's form factor just kind of makes it have this unique little market where, you have people who love the 3DS, but also don't like the fact that it's kind of restricted, so then you get this beautiful little gray area. I think that's kind of, like, the important thing about this, is that there's no, like, clear cut, like, this is the best handheld. You have options, and you kind of gotta just pick one based off of it. And I think that's kind of why I wanted to make this video. As I said, I love talking about these topics with some nuance, so I think that's everything really, and I guess we'll just move on to the conclusion. So I guess I'll wrap up now, but just by concluding overall, and for me at least, I'm probably going to be sticking with my 3DS. It does everything I want it to beautifully. I'm very happy with my purchase. It's been a really nice little handheld to have in my little ecosystem of stuff. I will say, though, I'm not sure if I'd ever try one of these handhelds. I've entertained a Steam Deck a couple times, but I could just never get the true, like, I guess, push to buy one. Like, I just worry that I'm going to end up, like, shelving it in a while, or just that I just won't use it. Like, for what it's worth, I always say my Switch 2 is kind of just my hub for all my games, and the Steam Deck kind of just introduces this, like, well, what do I do with this thing? And I don't really like that in tech, and when I do that, I'm like, well, like, it just doesn't feel right for me. So for me, that'd be a reason why I personally wouldn't get the Steam Deck. I completely understand why people love it. It's just not really my thing. I think for the Ayn Thor, I'm not sure I'd get one myself. As I said, I have a Switch 2, I have a 3DS. I kind of have both form factors, and I don't mind the Switch 2 size. So Ayn Thor is a really, really cool piece of hardware, but it's just, I don't think it's for me, but I do very much see the appeal of it, and I do understand people who want the 3DS form factor just on newer hardware. So if that's you, then let me know in the comments. Feel free to start a discussion. Let me know, like, what do you care the most about in a handheld? Like, is there anything that you agree with, anything you disagree with? Feel free to let me know, because, as I said, I would like to, hear what you have to say and what you think of these consoles. So I think that's everything, but, if you enjoyed, consider liking, subscribing, whatever. I hate to be pandery about it, but I think that's all, and I will see you in next week's upload if you stick around, and I will see you then. Bye-bye.